The knife stopped an inch from her throat. Kaelra had made exactly one mistake tonight, laughing at the wrong man in the moonlight. Now she stood frozen in the frost-covered garden while the most dangerous alpha alive pressed cold steel against her pulse. His eyes were winter itself, gray, merciless, empty of anything she could recognize as human. "Do you know who I am?" His voice was barely a whisper, but it crushed the air from her lungs. She should have begged, should have dropped to her knees. That's what Omegas did when they crossed a line this far. Instead, drunk on cheap wine and a lifetime of having nothing left to lose, Kaelra smiled. Someone who needs better taste in parties. If you want to see how a nobody survives insulting a king, and what happens when he decides she's worth keeping alive, stay until the end. Like this video, drop a comment with your city, and let's get into this. Part 1. A reckless spark in a den of predators. The summit of Howling Peaks was supposed to be neutral ground. That's what the treaty said, anyway, signed in blood and silver 60 years ago when the 5 packs finally stopped slaughtering each other long enough to realize the humans would wipe them all out if they didn't get their act together. Once a decade, the Alphas gathered here, high in the Korvath Mountains where the air was thin and the snow never fully melted, to pretend they were civilized. Kaelra knew better. She'd been to 3 of these summits in her 24 years, always as part of the Ashenvale delegation, always invisible, always there to serve drinks and disappear when the important people started talking. Omegas weren't supposed to have opinions about pack politics. They weren't supposed to be noticed at all, really, unless someone needed a scapegoat or a warm body to throw at a problem. That was fine by her. Being invisible had kept her alive this long. But tonight, the weight of all those stares, the dismissive glances, the sneers from betas who thought her rank made her less than dirt, the way even her own packmates avoided standing too close, had driven her outside into the freezing garden with a stolen bottle of wine and a bad attitude. The main hall was suffocating. 200 wolves crammed into a stone fortress built during some war she'd never bothered learning about, all pretending they weren't sizing each other up for weaknesses. The air reeked of power plays and old grudges. Kaelra had lasted about 40 minutes before her alpha, a brick-faced man named Garen, who'd barely acknowledged her existence in 5 years, sent her to fetch more glasses from the kitchens. She'd fetched them. Then she'd grabbed the wine. Then she'd walked out the side entrance and kept walking until the noise faded behind her. The garden was a ruin. Whoever had lived here before the Summit Treaty had loved roses, apparently, but a century of mountain winters had turned the carefully planned beds into a tangle of thorns and ice-covered vines. Stone benches sat at odd angles, cracked and listing. A fountain in the center had frozen mid-flow, creating jagged sculptures of ice that caught the moonlight and threw it in cold, sharp angles. Kaelra sat on the edge of the fountain, uncorked the bottle, and took a long drink. It burned going down. Cheap red, the kind served to people who didn't matter. Perfect. Running away? The voice came from behind her, a woman's voice, smooth and amused. Kaelra didn't turn around. Taking a break, there's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Footsteps crunched on frost. A tall beta in Ashenvale colors, gray and black, aggressive and boring, stepped into view. Senna. One of Garen's enforcers, and exactly the kind of person who thought bullying Omegas was a personality trait. You're supposed to be inside. Serving. I served. Now I'm out here. With stolen wine. Borrowed. Senna's lip curled. You're embarrassing the pack. Kaelra took another drink, slower this time, making sure Senna saw her swallow. How? No one knows I exist. They will if you keep acting like trash. Senna crossed her arms. She was broader than Kaelra, taller, built like someone who'd spent her whole life being told she mattered. Garen's pissed. He sent me to drag you back. Tell him I died. Kaelra. Tell him I fell off the mountain. Very tragic. He'll get over it in 5 minutes. Senna's eyes narrowed. For a second, Kaelra thought she might actually try something. Grab her arm maybe, haul her back inside like a misbehaving child. But Senna was smart enough to know that touching an Omega without permission, even a low-ranked one, crossed a line. Treaties were built on rules like that. Break enough of them and things got bloody. Instead, Senna smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You know what? Stay out here. Freeze. See if anyone notices. She turned and walked back toward the hall, her boots loud against the stone path. Kaelra waited until she was gone, then flipped her off. "Bitch," she muttered. The wine bottle was half empty now. The cold was starting to seep through her jacket. Thin leather, patched in 3 places, nothing like the heavy furs the higher-ranked wolves wore. She should go back inside. Find a corner, stay quiet, wait for this nightmare to end so she could go home to her tiny room and her collection of stolen books and the life she'd carved out of nothing. But she didn't move, because the thing about being invisible was that sometimes, just for a moment, you got tired of it. Rough night? Kaelra's head snapped up. A man stood on the other side of the fountain. She hadn't heard him approach, hadn't smelled him either, which should have been impossible. Wolves didn't sneak up on each other, not unless they were trying to kill you. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat the color of smoke. His face was sharp, all hard angles and pale skin, like someone had carved him out of ice and forgotten to add warmth. His hair was dark, pushed back from his forehead, and his eyes were gray, cold, unreadable. And he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the garden that mattered. Kaelra's instinct screamed at her to run. She took another drink instead. "Depends," she said. "Are you here to lecture me too?" The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "About what?" "Being an embarrassment, stealing wine, existing. Sounds like you've had a lot of lectures." "It's a skill." She tilted the bottle toward him. "Want some?" He didn't move, didn't blink, just kept watching her with those cold, gray eyes. Most people would have walked away by now. Most people would have written her off as drunk, stupid, not worth the effort. But this guy, whoever he was, stood there like he had all the time in the world. It was unsettling. "Who are you?" Kaelra asked. "Does it matter?" "Not really. I'm just curious why you're out here instead of inside with the rest of the self-important assholes." This time, he did smile. It was brief, sharp, and didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe I'm avoiding them." "Smart man. And you?" "Me?" Kaelra laughed. It came out bitter. "I'm nobody. Low-ranked Omega from a pack that barely remembers I exist. I'm here because someone has to carry the glasses, and apparently that's all I'm good for." She expected pity, or mockery, or the kind of polite disinterest people used when they wanted you to stop talking. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You don't sound like you believe that." "Believe what?" "That you're nobody." Kaelra blinked. The wine was making her head fuzzy, but she was pretty sure he'd just said something weird, unexpected. No one ever pushed back when she called herself nobody. That was the script. She said it, they agreed. Everyone moved on. "Well," she said slowly, "the universe seems pretty convinced." "The universe is often wrong." "Deep. Are you a philosopher or just drunk?" "Neither." "Then what are you?" He didn't answer, just kept looking at her with those unnerving eyes, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle she didn't know she represented. Kaelra should have left, should have grabbed her bottle, muttered something about needing to get back, and walked away before this conversation got weirder. But the wine had loosened the part of her brain that usually screamed warnings, and besides, when was the last time someone had actually talked to her? Not at her, not through her, but to her. Like she was a real person with thoughts worth hearing? "You're kind of intense," she said. "Has anyone ever told you that?" "Frequently. And you just lean into it?" "It's effective," Kaelra snorted. "For what? Scaring people?" "Among other things." "Well, congratulations. You're mildly creepy. Gold star." She meant it as a joke, a way to lighten the moment, maybe get him to crack that frozen expression. But something shifted in his face, a flicker of something dark and cold, gone so fast she almost missed it. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, sharper. "You should be more careful with your words." "Why? You going to report me to the etiquette police?" "No." He stepped closer. Just one step, but it erased half the distance between them, and suddenly the garden felt smaller, colder. But not everyone you insult will find it amusing. Kaelra's heart kicked against her ribs. The rational part of her brain, The part that had kept her alive through years of being invisible was screaming at her to shut up, apologize, back down. She ignored it. "Good thing I'm not trying to amuse anyone," she said, meeting his eyes. "I'm just out here drinking stolen wine and waiting for this whole stupid summit to be over. If that offends you, feel free to leave." Silence. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at her like she'd done something fascinating and unforgivable at the same time. Then, slowly, deliberately, he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You have no idea who I am," he said softly. "Do you? Should I? Most people would." "Well, I'm not most people." Kaelra raised the bottle in a mock toast. "I'm nobody, remember?" His smile widened. It didn't make him look friendlier. If anything, it made him look dangerous, like a wolf baring its teeth before it lunged. "Nobody," he repeated. "Interesting." And then he was moving, fast, faster than she could track, even with wolf senses that should have seen it coming. 1 second, he was standing on the other side of the fountain. The next, he was right in front of her, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating off him like winter itself had taken human shape. His hand caught her wrist, not hard, but firm, unyielding. The wine bottle slipped from her fingers and shattered on the stones. "Here's a lesson," he said quietly, his breath misting in the frozen air. "When someone warns you to be careful, you listen." Kaelra's pulse hammered. She tried to pull away, but his grip didn't budge. Not painful, just absolute, like arguing with gravity. "Let go," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "In a moment. Let go." He leaned closer, close enough that she could see the fractured gray of his eyes, the faint scars along his jawline, the way his expression had gone completely, utterly empty. "What's your name, Wham?" he asked. "Why do you care?" "Answer the question." There was no threat in his tone, no anger, just a flat, cold command that made something in her spine lock up. "Kaelra," she said. "Kaelra Voss." He repeated it, slow and deliberate, like he was committing it to memory. Then he let go. Kaelra stumbled back, her wrist tingling where he'd held it. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything except stand there while this stranger looked at her like she was something he'd just decided to keep. "What the hell's wrong with you?" she snapped. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out something small and silver. A ring, she realized. Simple, unadorned, but polished to a mirror shine. He held it up, letting the moonlight catch it. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "A ring. Congratulations." "It's a mark." His voice was soft, almost gentle. It made her skin crawl. "A claim. When someone wears this, it means they belong to someone who doesn't let go easily." Kaelra's throat went dry. "I'm not wearing your creepy ring." "No," he agreed. "You're not." He slipped it back into his coat. "But you'll remember this conversation," he continued, "and the next time you feel like mocking a stranger in the dark, you'll think twice. Who the hell do you think you are?" He smiled again. That cold, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll find out soon enough." And then he was gone, not walking away, not fading into the shadows, just gone, like he'd never been there at all. Kaelra stood alone in the ruined garden, her heart pounding, her wrist still tingling, her mind racing through the last 5 minutes trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The shattered wine bottle glittered on the stones. Her hands were shaking. "What the fuck?" she whispered. Kaelra didn't sleep that night. She went back inside eventually, couldn't stay in the garden forever, not with the temperature dropping and her jacket doing exactly nothing to keep her warm. Senna gave her a disgusted look when she slipped back into the main hall, but didn't say anything. Garen was too busy sucking up to a Nightfang alpha to notice her existence. She found a quiet corner behind a stone pillar and sat there, watching the crowd. Alphas everywhere. Tall, powerful, radiating dominance like a physical force. Betas circling them, jockeying for position. A handful of other Omegas scattered throughout, mostly young, mostly silent, mostly trying to be invisible. Kaelra scanned the room, looking for the man from the garden. She didn't find him, which made sense. He was probably some mid-level enforcer from a pack she'd never heard of, playing mind games because he had nothing better to do. Creepy, sure. Unsettling, definitely. But not important. That's what she told herself anyway. It didn't explain why her wrist still tingled or why his voice kept echoing in her head. You'll find out soon enough. By the time the summit finally broke up around 3 in the morning, Kaelra was exhausted. She stumbled back to the tiny room she shared with 2 other Ashenvale Omegas, both already asleep, thank God, and collapsed onto her cot without bothering to take off her boots. Sleep came hard and restless, full of fractured dreams, gray eyes, frozen gardens, a voice like winter telling her she'd made a mistake. She woke to someone shaking her shoulder. Get up. Kaelra groaned and tried to bury her face in the pillow. Go away. Kaelra, get up. The urgency in the voice cut through the fog. She cracked one eye open and found Senna standing over her, looking pale and tense. What? Kaelra mumbled. Garen wants you, now. Tell him I'm dead. I'm serious. Senna's hand tightened on her shoulder. He's pissed. I don't know what you did, but I didn't do anything. Then why is the Dominion King asking for you by name? Kaelra's brain stalled. What? Senna pulled her upright, forcing her to sit. I don't know, but Garen got word an hour ago that someone from the Dominion delegation wants to speak with you, specifically. He's losing his mind trying to figure out what you could have possibly done to get their attention. I didn't, Kaelra's voice cracked. I didn't talk to anyone from Dominion. I don't even know who. And then it hit her. The man in the garden. You'll find out soon enough. Oh no. Kaelra? Senna's face was pale. What did you do? I didn't. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I didn't know what? But Kaelra was already on her feet, stumbling toward the door, her mind racing through everything she'd said last night. Every stupid, reckless word, mildly creepy. Gold star. I'm just out here drinking stolen wine. If that offends you, feel free to leave. Oh, fuck. The Dominion King. Rix Calder. The most feared alpha in 5 generations. The wolf who'd unified 3 packs under his rule through a combination of brutal efficiency and a curse that turned him into something worse than a monster when the moon was full. She'd mocked him, to his face, while drunk, and he'd marked her, not with a ring, but with a warning, a claim. Kaelra made it 3 steps down the hall before her legs gave out. Senna caught her. What the hell is going on? Much say, Nolkas. I'm dead, Kaelra whispered. I'm so fucking dead. You don't know that. He's going to kill me. Who? But before Kaelra could answer, the door at the end of the hall opened, and 2 wolves in Dominion colors, black and silver, sharp and cold, stepped through. They weren't smiling. Kaelra Voss? One of them said. She nodded. Her throat had closed up. You're coming with us. Why? The wolf's expression didn't change. The king wants to see you. Senna's grip tightened on her arm. She's under Ashenvale protection. Not anymore. The second wolf stepped forward, and Kaelra caught the scent of dominance rolling off him like a wave. As of 1 hour ago, Kaelra Voss has been transferred to Dominion custody under Treaty Clause 73. If Ashenvale has a problem with that, they can file a complaint with the council. Senna's face went white. You can't just... We can. We did. The first wolf gestured toward the door. Let's go. Kaelra's legs wouldn't move. She stood there, frozen, while the 2 enforcers closed the distance and gripped her arms, not rough, but firm, unyielding. Wait, she managed. I didn't... Save it for the king. They dragged her into the hall. Behind her, Senna was shouting something, demanding to see Garen, threatening to call the council. But her voice faded as the enforcers pulled Kaelra through a side door, down a narrow staircase, and out into the freezing pre-dawn air. A sleek black vehicle waited in the courtyard. Expensive, armored, the kind of thing that screamed power and don't fuck with us. They shoved her into the back seat. The door slammed shut, and as the vehicle pulled away from the summit fortress, climbing higher into the mountains where the Dominion stronghold waited, Kaelra pressed her face against the cold window and tried not to scream. The knife stopped an inch from her throat. Kaelra Voss had made exactly one mistake tonight, laughing at the wrong man in the moonlight. Now she stood frozen in the frost-covered garden while the most dangerous alpha alive pressed cold steel against her pulse. His eyes were winter itself, gray, merciless, empty of anything she could recognize as human. "Do you know who I am?" His voice was barely a whisper, but it crushed the air from her lungs. She should have begged, should have dropped to her knees. That's what Omegas did when they crossed a line this far. Instead, drunk on cheap wine and a lifetime of having nothing left to lose, Kaelra smiled. Someone who needs better taste in parties. If you want to see how a nobody survives insulting a king and what happens when he decides she's worth keeping alive, stay until the end. Like this video, drop a comment with your city, and let's get into this. Part 1. A reckless spark in a den of predators. The summit of Howling Peaks was supposed to be neutral ground. That's what the treaty said, anyway, signed in blood and silver 60 years ago when the five packs finally stopped slaughtering each other long enough to realize the humans would wipe them all out if they didn't get their act together. Once a decade, the alphas gathered here, high in the Korvath Mountains where the air was thin and the snow never fully melted, to pretend they were civilized. Kaelra knew better. She'd been to 3 of these summits in her 24 years, always as part of the Ashenvale delegation, always invisible, always there to serve drinks and disappear when the important people started talking. Omegas weren't supposed to have opinions about pack politics. They weren't supposed to be noticed at all, really, unless someone needed a scapegoat or a warm body to throw at a problem. That was fine by her. Being invisible had kept her alive this long. But tonight, the weight of all those stares, the dismissive glances, the sneers from betas who thought her rank made her less than dirt, the way even her own packmates avoided standing too close, had driven her outside into the freezing garden with a stolen bottle of wine and a bad attitude. The main hall was suffocating. 200 wolves crammed into a stone fortress built during some war she'd never bothered learning about, all pretending they weren't sizing each other up for weaknesses. The air reeked of power plays and old grudges. Massive iron chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, dripping with candles that cast dancing shadows across the faces of wolves who looked like they'd been carved from marble and cruelty. Kaelra had lasted about 40 minutes before her alpha, a brick-faced man named Garen, who'd barely acknowledged her existence in 5 years, sent her to fetch more glasses from the kitchens. She'd fetched them. Then she'd grabbed the wine. Then she'd walked out the side entrance and kept walking until the noise faded behind her. The garden was a ruin. Whoever had lived here before the Summit Treaty had loved roses, apparently, but a century of mountain winters had turned the carefully planned beds into a tangle of thorns and ice-covered vines. Stone benches sat at odd angles, cracked and listing. A fountain in the center had frozen mid-flow, creating jagged sculptures of ice that caught the moonlight and threw it in cold, sharp angles. Kaelra sat on the edge of the fountain, uncorked the bottle, and took a long drink. It burned going down. Cheap red, the kind served to people who didn't matter. Perfect. She tilted her head back, staring at the stars. They were brighter up here in the mountains, away from the valley settlements where most packs made their homes, cold and distant and utterly indifferent to the drama playing out below them. "You look like you're contemplating murder or suicide," a voice said behind her. "Can't decide which." Kaelra didn't turn around. Option 3. Getting drunk enough that I stop caring about either. Ambitious. Footsteps crunched on frost. A tall beta in Ashenvale colors, gray and black, aggressive and boring, stepped into view. Senna, one of Garen's enforcers, and exactly the kind of person who thought bullying Omegas was a personality trait. She was broad-shouldered, built like someone who'd spent her whole life being told she mattered, with a face that was pretty in a sharp, cold way. "You're supposed to be inside." "Serving?" "I served. Now I'm out here." "With stolen wine." "Borrowed." Senna's lip curled. "You're embarrassing the pack." Kaelra took another drink, slower this time, making sure Senna saw her swallow. How? No one knows I exist. They will if you keep acting like trash. Senna crossed her arms. Her coat was thick fur, dyed the gray of Ashenvale's colors, lined with silver thread. Expensive. The kind of thing given to wolves who mattered. Garen's pissed. He sent me to drag you back. Tell him I died. Kaelra. Tell him I fell off the mountain. Very tragic. He'll get over it in 5 minutes. Kaelra waved the bottle vaguely at the fortress. Probably won't even notice until someone mentions they're short a glass carrier. Senna's eyes narrowed. For a second, Kaelra thought she might actually try something. Grab her arm, maybe. Haul her back inside like a misbehaving child. But Senna was smart enough to know that touching an Omega without permission, even a low-ranked one, crossed a line. Treaties were built on rules like that. Break enough of them, and things got bloody. Instead, Senna smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You know what? Stay out here. Freeze. See if anyone notices. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping. Maybe one of the visiting alphas will find you. Wouldn't that be fun? Fresh Omega, all alone in the dark, smelling like cheap wine and desperation? I'm sure they'd be gentle. Kaelra's stomach clenched, but she kept her face blank. Is that a threat or a fantasy? Hard to tell with you. Senna's smile widened. Careful, Kaelra. You might be untouchable under treaty law, but accidents happen at summits. Wolves disappear. No one asks questions. Then I guess I'll be extra careful not to trip. Kaelra raised the bottle in a mock toast. Thanks for the concern, truly touching. For a moment, Senna looked like she wanted to say something else, something vicious, probably, something that would cut deeper than the casual threats. But then voices echoed from the fortress entrance, loud and argumentative, and Senna's attention snapped toward them. Whatever, she muttered. Enjoy freezing to death. She turned and walked back toward the hall, her boots loud against the stone path. Kaelra waited until she was gone, then flipped her off. Bitch, she muttered. The wine bottle was half empty now. The cold was starting to seep through her jacket, thin leather, patched in 3 places, nothing like the heavy furs the higher-ranked wolves wore. She should go back inside. Find a corner, stay quiet, wait for this nightmare to end so she could go home to her tiny room and her collection of stolen books and the life she'd carved out of nothing. But she didn't move, because the thing about being invisible was that sometimes, just for a moment, you got tired of it. Tired of swallowing insults, tired of pretending you didn't exist, tired of living small so other people could feel big. Kaelra took another drink and let the burn settle in her chest. The garden was quiet except for the wind moving through the dead roses. Peaceful, almost. She could see why someone had built this place once. Before the wars, before the treaties, when wolves could afford to waste space on beauty instead of survival. A twig snapped somewhere behind her. Kaelra's head turned, her senses sharpening despite the wine. She scanned the shadows between the twisted vines and broken statues. Nothing. Probably just the wind. Or a rat. The fortress was full of them. She was about to turn back to the fountain when a voice spoke from the darkness. Rough night? Kaelra's head snapped up. A man stood on the other side of the fountain. She hadn't heard him approach. Hadn't smelled him either, which should have been impossible. Wolves didn't sneak up on each other, not unless they were trying to kill you. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat the color of smoke that hung open despite the freezing temperature. Underneath, his clothes were simple. Dark shirt, dark pants. Nothing decorative. Nothing that screamed wealth or rank. But his face was sharp, all hard angles and pale skin, like someone had carved him out of ice and forgotten to add warmth. His hair was dark, pushed back from his forehead, and his eyes were gray, cold, unreadable. And he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the garden that mattered. Kaelra's instinct screamed at her to run. She took another drink instead. Depends, she said, pleased when her voice came out steady. Are you here to lecture me too? The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. About what? Being an embarrassment, stealing wine, existing. She gestured with the bottle. Take your pick. I've heard them all tonight. Sounds like you've had a lot of lectures. It's a skill. She tilted the bottle toward him. Want some? He didn't move, didn't blink, just kept watching her with those cold, gray eyes that seemed to strip away every defense she'd ever built. Most people would have walked away by now. Most people would have written her off as drunk, stupid, not worth the effort. But this guy, whoever he was, stood there like he had all the time in the world. It was unsettling. "Who are you?" Kaelra asked. "Does it matter?" "Not really. I'm just curious why you're out here instead of inside with the rest of the self-important assholes." This time, he did smile. It was brief, sharp, and didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe I'm avoiding them." "Smart man." Kaelra studied him more carefully. He didn't have the look of an Ashenvale wolf, too still, too controlled. And his scent, what little of it she could catch past the wine, was unfamiliar. "What pack are you with?" "Guess." "I don't play games." "Pity." He moved then, a single step to the left, positioning himself where the moonlight caught his face more clearly. They're often more interesting than the truth. Kaelra frowned. There was something off about him, something that made her skin prickle with warning, even as the wine dulled the sharper edges of her fear. He moved too smoothly, spoke too carefully, like every word was calculated, every gesture deliberate. "You're weird," she said. "I've been called worse. I bet." She took another drink, watching him over the rim of the bottle. "So what do you want? If you're out here to tell me I'm a disgrace to Omega kind, you can save it. Already got that speech. I'm not here to tell you anything." "Then why are you talking to me?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. She didn't. "Because you're interesting," he said finally. Kaelra laughed. It came out bitter and sharp. "Interesting, right. That's a new one." "You don't believe me." "Why would I? Nobody finds Omegas interesting unless they want something from us. And I'm not even a good Omega. Wrong rank, wrong attitude, wrong everything. So either you're lying or you've got terrible taste. Maybe both." Despite herself, Kaelra felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "At least you're honest about it." Honesty is underrated. He moved again, circling the fountain slowly. Not threatening, not yet, but deliberate, like a wolf testing the edges of territory. "What's your name? Why do you care?" "Humor me." Kaelra hesitated. Giving her name felt dangerous somehow, like handing over ammunition. But what did it matter? She was nobody. A low-ranked Omega from a pack that barely remembered she existed. What could he possibly do with her name that life hadn't already done? "Kaelra," she said. "Kaelra Voss." He repeated it slowly, like he was tasting each syllable. "Kaelra." The way he said it made something cold slide down her spine. "And you?" she asked. "Do I get a name, or are we doing the mysterious stranger thing all night? Would you believe me if I told you?" "Depends on what you tell me." He smiled again. That same cold, sharp smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then let's skip it. Names complicate things. So do creepy strangers who appear out of nowhere." "Fair point." They stood there for a moment, separated by the frozen fountain, watching each other. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of voices from the fortress, laughter, arguments, the constant hum of too many wolves in one place. Kaelra broke the silence first. "You still haven't told me what you want." "I told you, you're interesting." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." He stopped moving, standing directly across from her now. The moonlight caught his face at an angle, throwing half of it into shadow. "You don't belong here." "Wow, really perceptive. Did you figure that out from the cheap jacket or the stolen wine?" "Neither." His expression didn't change. "You don't belong here because you're not trying to. Everyone else in that fortress is performing, pretending to be civilized, pretending the treaties matter, pretending they're not one insult away from ripping each other apart. But you're not pretending. You're just enduring." Kaelra's throat tightened. She wanted to snap back, to deflect with sarcasm like she always did. But something about the way he said it, flat, factual, like he'd looked inside her head and read the truth written there, made the words stick. "So what?" she managed finally. "You feel sorry for me?" "No." "Then what?" "I'm curious." He took a step closer. Just one, but it erased half the distance between them, and suddenly the garden felt smaller, colder. What does someone like you do when enduring isn't enough anymore? Someone like me. An Omega with a sharp tongue and no survival instinct. Kaelra's jaw tightened. I've survived this long. By being invisible. It works. Does it? Another step, closer now. Close enough that she could see the faint scars along his jawline, the way his eyes reflected the moonlight like polished stone. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's tired of working. You don't know anything about me. I know you're out here alone, drunk, mocking people you shouldn't mock. His voice dropped lower, quieter. I know you're not afraid enough. Of what? Me. The word hung in the frozen air between them. Kaelra's pulse kicked against her ribs. The rational part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through years of being invisible, was screaming at her to shut up, apologize, back down. She ignored it. Should I be? She asked. Most people are. I'm not most people. No, he agreed softly. You're not. And then he moved, fast, faster than she could track, even with wolf senses that should have seen it coming. 1 second he was standing on the other side of the fountain. The next, he was right in front of her, so close she could feel the cold radiating off him, like winter itself had taken human shape. The wine bottle slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the stones, red liquid spreading like blood across the frost. Kaelra tried to step back, but her legs hit the fountain edge. Trapped. His hand came up, not touching her, not yet, but hovering near her throat, close enough that she could feel the heat of his skin despite the cold air. Here's a lesson, he said quietly, his breath misting between them. When someone warns you to be careful, you listen. Kaelra's heart hammered. She should be terrified, should be frozen with fear. But instead, anger flared hot and sharp in her chest. Let me go, she said. I'm not touching you. You're threatening me. I'm warning you. His eyes, those cold gray eyes, bored into hers. There's a difference. It feels the same from here. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. It was gone too fast to tell. You really don't know who I am, he said. It wasn't a question. Should I? Most people would. Well, I'm not most people. Kaelra forced herself to meet his gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away, to submit, to show her throat like a good little Omega. And I don't care who you are. You don't get to corner me in a garden and act like I owe you fear. His hand dropped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, not cruel exactly, but not kind either. Like he'd heard a joke only he understood. You're either very brave or very stupid, he said. Why not both? That would explain a lot. He stepped back, giving her space. The absence of his presence felt like a physical thing, like pressure suddenly released. What's your pack? Kaelra Voss. Ashenvale? Why? And your rank? Omega, bottom of the ladder. Does it matter? Everything matters. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small and silver. A ring, she realized. Simple, unadorned, but polished to a mirror shine. He held it up, letting the moonlight catch it. Do you know what this is? He asked. A ring. Congratulations. It's a mark. His voice was soft, almost gentle. It made her skin crawl. A claim. When someone wears this, it means they belong to someone who doesn't let go easily. Kaelra's throat went dry. I'm not wearing your creepy ring. No, he agreed. You're not. He slipped it back into his coat. But you'll remember this conversation, he continued, and the next time you feel like mocking a stranger in the dark, you'll think twice. Who the hell do you think you are? He smiled again, that cold, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. You'll find out soon enough. The wind picked up, carrying voices from the fortress. Someone shouting, glass breaking, the kind of chaos that meant the political niceties were wearing thin. When Kaelra looked back, the stranger was gone, not walking away, not fading into the shadows, just Gone. Like he'd never been there at all. She stood alone in the ruined garden, her heart pounding, her hands shaking, her mind racing through the last 10 minutes trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The shattered wine bottle glittered on the stones, red liquid already freezing in the cold. What the fuck? Kaelra whispered to the empty air Sats. She didn't go back inside right away. Instead, she sat on the fountain edge, staring at the broken glass and trying to get her breathing under control. Her hands were still shaking from cold or adrenaline, she couldn't tell. Maybe both. You'll find out soon enough. What did that mean? Was he planning to report her to someone? Get her in trouble for… what? Being rude? Drinking stolen wine? Existing while Omega? Kaelra pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to think through the wine fog in her head. She'd been careful her whole life, kept her head down, avoided attention, survived by being invisible. And in one night, one stupid, reckless night, she'd thrown it all away by mouthing off to a stranger who clearly had powers she couldn't begin to measure. "Idiot," she muttered. "You're a complete idiot." The cold was getting worse. Her fingers were starting to go numb, and her breath came out in sharp white clouds. She needed to go back inside, needed to find a warm corner and figure out damage control before whoever that man was decided to make her life even worse. Kaelra pushed herself to her feet, her legs unsteady. The fortress loomed above her, all gray stone in sharp angles, windows blazing with firelight. From here, she could hear the noise of the summit, voices raised in argument or laughter, the clink of glasses, the constant undercurrent of tension that came from putting too many predators in one room. She took a breath and started walking. The side entrance was still unlocked. Kaelra slipped through, grateful for the warmth that hit her like a wall. The corridor was empty. Most of the wolves were still in the main hall, and the servants had retreated to the kitchens to avoid getting caught in whatever political disaster was brewing. She made it halfway to the servant quarters before running into Senna. "There you are." Senna looked annoyed but not as angry as before. More nervous. Her eyes kept darting toward the main hall like she expected something to explode. "Garen's looking for you." Kaelra's stomach dropped. "Why?" "How should I know? He just told me to find you and bring you to him." Senna grabbed her arm, not gentle, but not rough either. "Come on, and try not to look like you've been drinking." "I was outside. It's freezing. Obviously, I've been drinking." "Then try not to smell like it." They walked quickly through the corridors, Senna's grip firm on her elbow. Kaelra's mind raced. Had the stranger already reported her? Was Garen about to tear into her for embarrassing the pack? The main hall was chaos. Someone had knocked over a table, spilling wine across the floor. Two alphas from different packs were standing nose to nose, their enforcers hovering close, ready to intervene if things got physical. In the corner, a group of betas were arguing loudly about trade routes, their voices sharp with hostility. Garen stood near the massive fireplace, his broad frame tense, talking to someone Kaelra couldn't see through the crowd. Senna dragged her over. "Found her," Senna said. Garen turned, his face a mask of controlled irritation. He was a big man, not tall but wide, built like a boulder with a permanent scowl etched into his features. Gray threaded through his dark hair, and his eyes were the flat brown of someone who'd stopped caring about subtlety years ago. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded. "Garden," Kaelra said. "Getting air?" "Getting drunk, you mean?" He looked her up and down with the kind of disgust usually reserved for something scraped off a boot. "You're a disgrace." "So I've been told." His hand came up, not to hit her, that would violate treaty, but close enough to make her flinch. "Watch your mouth. I don't care if you're bottom-rank garbage, you represent Ashenvale when you're here. Act like it." Kaelra bit down on the inside of her cheek, tasting blood. "Yes, Alpha." "I should leave you here," Garen continued. "Let one of the other packs deal with you. But unfortunately, treaties mean I'm stuck dragging your worthless ass back home." He turned to Senna. "Keep her out of sight for the rest of the night. I don't want to see her face again until we leave." "Yes, Alpha." Garen stalked off, shouldering his way through the crowd toward another cluster of arguing wolves. Senna's grip on Kaelra's arm tightened. "You heard him. Let's go." They made it to the servant quarters without incident. The small room Kaelra shared with two other Omegas was empty. Her roommates were probably still working in the kitchens or hiding somewhere quieter. Senna shoved her inside and closed the door. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Nothing. Bullshit. Garen doesn't lose it like that over nothing." Senna crossed her arms. "Did you talk to someone? Insult someone important?" "I was alone in the garden. The whole time." Kaelra hesitated. "Mostly." "Mostly?" Senna's eyes narrowed. "Who did you talk to?" "Just some guy. I don't know who he was." "What did he look like?" "Tall, dark hair, gray eyes, weird." Kaelra shrugged, trying to seem casual even though her heart was still racing. "He asked my name and then left. That's it." Senna stared at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Stay here," she said finally. "Don't leave this room. Don't talk to anyone. And for the love of—" She stopped, shook her head. "Just stay put." She left, closing the door hard behind her. Kaelra stood in the middle of the small room, listening to her own breathing. Something was wrong. She could feel it, a pressure building, like a storm gathering just over the horizon. The way Senna had looked at her, the way Garen had reacted. The stranger's parting words. "You'll find out soon enough." Kaelra sat on the edge of her cot and waited. Sleep didn't come. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the conversation in the garden over and over. The stranger's face, his voice, the way he'd moved, too fast, too controlled, like violence wrapped in a civilized shell. When someone wears this, it means they belong to someone who doesn't let go easily. Kaelra shivered despite the blanket. Her roommates came back around midnight, exhausted and complaining about entitled alphas and impossible demands. They barely acknowledged her before collapsing into their own cots. The fortress gradually quieted. Voices faded. Footsteps stopped echoing through the corridors. Kaelra drifted somewhere between sleep and waking, trapped in fragments of dreams, gray eyes, frozen gardens, a voice like winter telling her she'd made a mistake she couldn't take back. The pounding on the door jerked her awake. "Kaelra Voss!" She sat up, disoriented. Pale dawn light filtered through the narrow window. Her roommates were already gone, probably sent to help with breakfast preparations. The pounding came again, harder. "Open up!" Kaelra stumbled to the door and pulled it open. Senna stood there, her face pale and tight with something that looked like fear. "Get dressed," she said. "Now." "What's now, Kaelra?" Senna pushed past her into the room, grabbing Kaelra's jacket from the hook and shoving it at her. "You need to come with me." "Why? What happened?" "Garen got word an hour ago." Senna's hands were shaking as she pulled Kaelra toward the door. "Someone from the Dominion delegation requested a meeting with you, specifically, by name." Kaelra's blood went cold. "What?" "I don't know what you did, but—" Senna's voice cracked. "Kaelra, it's bad. Garen is losing his mind. He can't figure out how you got their attention, and now—" "I didn't do anything!" "Then why are they asking for you?" The pieces clicked together in Kaelra's head with horrible clarity. The stranger, the gray eyes, the warning. "You'll find out soon enough." "Oh no," Kaelra whispered. "Oh, fuck. No, no, no." "What did you do?" Senna demanded. But Kaelra couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, because she'd just realized exactly who she'd been talking to in that frozen garden. Rix Calder, the Dominion King, the most feared alpha in 5 generations, the wolf with a curse that turned him into a monster, and she'd called him weird. Her legs buckled. Senna caught her, barely. "Kaelra, I'm dead," Kaelra managed. "I'm so fucking dead. You don't know that. He's going to kill me." "Who?" But before Kaelra could answer, the door at the end of the hall opened with a crash that echoed like thunder. 2 wolves in Dominion colors, black and silver, sharp and cold, stepped through. They were tall, broad, moving with the kind of predatory grace that marked elite enforcers. The kind who didn't ask questions before they broke bones. The lead wolf's eyes scanned the hall and locked onto Kaelra. "Kaelra Voss?" His voice was flat, professional, the kind of tone that didn't allow for argument. She nodded. Her throat had closed up. "You're coming with us." Senna stepped forward, positioning herself between Kaelra and the enforcers. "She's under Ashenvale protection. You can't just—" As of 1 hour ago, Kaelra Voss has been transferred to Dominion custody under Treaty Clause 73. The second enforcer produced a rolled document sealed with black wax and silver thread. "If Ashenvale has a problem with that, they can file a complaint with the council." "Transferred?" Senna's voice went shrill. "You can't transfer a pack member without—" "We can. We did." The lead enforcer's eyes didn't leave Kaelra. "Miss Voss, you need to come with us. Now." Kaelra's legs wouldn't move. She stood there frozen while the two enforcers closed the distance. "Wait," she managed. Her voice came out thin and weak. "There's been a mistake." "Save it for the king." The lead enforcer gripped her arm, not rough, but firm, unyielding. "Let's go." They pulled her into the hall. Senna was shouting now, demanding to see Garen, threatening to call the council, her voice rising with panic. Other wolves appeared in doorways, watching with wide eyes as the Dominion enforcers dragged an Omega through the fortress. Kaelra tried to dig her heels in, but they were stronger. Of course they were stronger. "Please," she said. I didn't know." They didn't respond, just kept walking, dragging her through corridors and downstairs, past shocked servants and staring pack members, until they reached a side entrance she'd never seen before. A vehicle waited in the gray dawn light, sleek, black, armored, the kind that screamed wealth and power and "don't fuck with us." One of the enforcers opened the back door. "Get in, please." He pushed her, not hard, but enough to send her stumbling into the leather seat. The door slammed shut before she could scramble back out. Locks clicked. Through the tinted window, Kaelra watched the fortress recede as the vehicle pulled away, climbing higher into the mountains where the Dominion stronghold waited in the clouds like a fortress of ice and shadow. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried not to scream, because she'd made exactly one mistake last night, and now she was going to pay for it with everything she had. The storm hit on the 7th night. Kaelra had been counting days the way prisoners count scratches on cell walls, each one a small victory of survival, each one bringing her closer to— what? Escape? Death? She didn't know anymore. The fortress had become her entire world. A maze of stone corridors and locked doors, of servants who wouldn't meet her eyes and guards who watched her like she might explode at any moment. She'd learned its rhythms, when the patrols changed, when the kitchens were least watched, which hallways led to dead ends and which ones had windows she could open. Not that opening them did any good. The fortress sat so high in the mountains that clouds drifted past the windows like ghosts. The drop below was measured in thousands of feet. Even wolves didn't survive falls like that. She'd tried escaping twice in the first 3 days. The first time she'd made it to the outer courtyard before 2 guards caught her and dragged her back, their grips bruising her arms. No punishment. Just a locked door and Rix's voice through the wood. "Try again, and I'll chain you to the bed." The second time she'd gotten further, all the way to the mountain path that led down from the fortress. She'd run until her lungs burned and her legs screamed until the thin air made her dizzy and sick. Rix had found her himself. He'd appeared out of the darkness like something conjured from nightmares, his eyes reflecting moonlight, his expression empty of everything except cold certainty. He hadn't said a word, just picked her up and carried her back while she beat her fists against his chest and screamed herself hoarse. After that, he'd started making her work. "If you're going to be here," he'd said, dropping a stack of ancient texts on the table in his study, "you're going to be useful." Kaelra had stared at the books, then at him. "I'm not your secretary. No, you're my prisoner, but prisoners who work eat better and sleep in warmer rooms." He gestured at the texts. "These are records from the old pacts, treaties, histories, bloodline documents. I need them organized and cross-referenced. Do it yourself. I'm giving you a choice, Kaelra. Work, or spend your days locked in a cell with nothing but your thoughts." His gray eyes had pinned her in place. Which sounds worse? She'd picked up the first book. That had been 4 days ago. Now she spent her mornings in Rix's study, a massive room lined with shelves that reached the ceiling, filled with books and scrolls and documents that smelled like dust and old blood. The work was tedious, matching names across different records, tracking bloodlines through centuries of careful breeding, noting which packs had allied and which had gone extinct. But it kept her mind busy, kept her from thinking about the fact that she was trapped here, claimed by a king she'd insulted, with no idea what he actually wanted from her. Rix was always there, not hovering, not watching directly, but present, working at his desk, reading reports, occasionally asking her questions about what she'd found. His presence was like a weight in the room, constant and inescapable. He never touched her, never threatened, never raised his voice. Somehow, that made it worse, because she could feel the violence in him, coiled tight beneath that frozen exterior. Could see it in the way he moved, too controlled, too precise, like he was holding himself back from something catastrophic. The servants feared him. The guards obeyed without question. Even the other alphas who visited the fortress spoke to him with careful respect. Kaelra had mocked this man to his face, and he'd kept her alive. She didn't understand it, didn't trust it, but she also didn't have a choice except to survive it. The study had become familiar over the past days. She'd learned which floorboards creaked, which shelves held the oldest books, where Rix kept his personal correspondence. She'd found maps of the territories, records of old battles, letters from other pack leaders requesting audiences or alliances. And she'd found references to the curse. They were scattered throughout the text, never explicit, always coded in careful language. The king's affliction, the shadow that walks when the moon is full, the price of unification. Kaelra had pieced together fragments. Rix had unified 3 packs under Dominion rule 10 years ago, crushing resistance and ending decades of territorial wars. But the unification had come with a cost, a curse bound to him through blood and violence that turned him into something worse than a wolf when the moon reached its peak. The text didn't say what, exactly, just that people died, that the king had to be locked away during the full moon, that his own pack feared those nights more than they feared enemy attacks. She'd been reading about bloodline curses when Rick spoke, making her jump. Find something interesting? Kaelra looked up. He was watching her from his desk, his expression unreadable. Just trying to understand why you're so screwed up, she said. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Any theories? A few, none of them good. I'd expect nothing less. He stood, moving to the window. Outside, clouds had started to gather, dark and heavy, promising snow. The storm's coming. I can see that. No, you can't. His voice had gone flat, cold. This isn't a normal storm, Kaelra. This is the kind that traps you for days, buries roads, kills anyone stupid enough to be caught outside. Frowned. So we stay inside. That's what fortresses are for. Yes. He was still staring out the window, his shoulders tense. We stay inside. Something in his tone made her skin prickle. What aren't you telling me? She asked. Rix turned, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she saw something crack in that frozen expression. Not warmth, not kindness, but something raw and jagged, like a wound barely healed. The full moon is tonight, he said quietly. Kaelra's stomach dropped. She'd lost track of the lunar cycle, too focused on survival to pay attention to the sky. But now that he'd said it, she could feel it. That pull in her blood that all wolves felt when the moon approached fullness. The instinct that made them restless, made them want to run and hunt and be. For normal wolves, it was manageable, uncomfortable, but controllable. For Rix, what happens? She asked. I lock myself in the vault below the fortress, alone, with enough chains to hold me until morning. His eyes met hers. And you stay as far away as possible. Why? What? Because when the moon rises, I won't be me anymore. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. I'll be the thing the curse made me, and that thing doesn't recognize allies or prisoners or anything except violence. Kaelra's mouth went dry. How bad? Bad enough that I've killed 17 people during transformations. His voice didn't waver. Guards who got too close. Servants who didn't lock the doors fast enough. One alpha who thought he could use the curse against me. Jesus. No gods helped them. Rix moved toward the door. You'll stay in your room tonight. The guards will lock it from the outside. Don't try to leave. Don't try to be clever. Just wait until morning. And if you break out, I won't. The vault was built for this. But if you do, then run, he said simply. As fast and as far as you can. And pray I don't catch you. He left before she could respond. Us. The storm arrived with the sunset. Wind howled through the fortress, rattling windows and doors. Snow came down in sheets, so thick Kaelra couldn't see more than a few feet past the glass. Temperature dropped so fast she could watch frost spread across the stone walls. 2 guards escorted her to her room, a small chamber 3 floors up, better than the cell she'd started in, but still clearly a prison. They didn't speak, just waited while she went inside, then locked the door behind her with a heavy iron bolt. Kaelra sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the storm. The room had a window, narrow, barred, impossible to escape through. She could see the courtyard below, already buried under a foot of snow. Beyond that, nothing but white chaos. Somewhere beneath her feet, Rix was chaining himself to a wall. Kaelra tried to imagine it. The king of Dominion, the most feared alpha alive, alone in the dark, waiting to become a monster. Did he fight it? Did he rage against the chains? Or did he just endure? You're just enduring. That's what he'd said about her, that first night in the garden. Maybe they weren't so different after all. Hours passed, the storm got worse, wind screamed against the fortress walls like something alive trying to claw its way inside. Kaelra paced the room, too restless to sit still, her instincts screaming at her that something was wrong. Midnight came. The moon rose somewhere behind the clouds. Invisible, but she could feel it. That pull in her blood, that wild urge that made her want to break things and run and fight. And then she heard it, a sound from deep below. Not quite a howl. Not quite a scream. Something in between, raw and agonized and furious. Kaelra's hands clenched into fists. Another sound. Closer this time. Metal shrieking, chains snapping maybe, or doors being torn from hinges. She ran to the door and pounded on it. Hey, what's happening? No response. More sounds from below. Crashes. Something heavy hitting stone, voices shouting in panic. Kaelra grabbed the iron bars on her window and looked down. The courtyard was chaos. Guards running in every direction, servants fleeing toward the outer buildings, and in the center of it all, something dark and massive moving through the snow like a nightmare-given form. She couldn't see it clearly through the storm. Just impressions. Too large, too fast, wrong proportions. It moved like a wolf but bigger, hunched, its shape twisted into something that shouldn't exist. A guard got too close. The thing moved, a blur of motion too quick to follow, and the guard went down, screaming. Kaelra stumbled back from the window, her heart hammering. The vault was built for this. Clearly, it hadn't been built well enough. More screams from below. The sound of wood splintering. Footsteps thundering through the hallways, people running, trying to get to safety. Kaelra tried the door again. Still locked. She was trapped. Locked in a room while something that used to be Rick's tore through his own fortress, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. Except there was. The thought came unbidden, insane, completely irrational. She could feel it in her blood. That same instinct that had driven her to mock a king in a moonlit garden, that had made her survive years of being invisible through sheer, stubborn refusal to break. The same reckless courage that had gotten her into this mess. What if she could stop it? Not kill it, not fight it, but stabilize it, calm it. The way she'd calmed aggressive wolves back in Ashenvale when they got too worked up during training sessions. It wasn't a power, exactly, more like an instinct, a way of projecting calm that made other wolves settle. She'd never tried it on anything like this. But she was an Omega. That's what Omegas did, supposedly. Balance the pack, soothe the aggressive instincts of alphas and betas. It was why some packs kept them around despite considering them worthless for fighting. What if that's what Rix needed? Not chains, not a vault, but someone who could stand in the eye of the storm and refuse to run. This is the stupidest thing you've ever thought of, Kaelra muttered. She grabbed the wooden chair from the corner and smashed it against the window bars. The wood splintered. The bars didn't budge. She tried again, and again, until her arms ached and the chair was kindling. The bars had loosened. Kaelra braced her feet and pulled with everything she had. Metal groaned. Ancient mortar crumbled. One bar came free, then another. The gap was barely wide enough. Kaelra squeezed through, her jacket catching on rough iron, the cold wind hitting her like a fist. She hung from the window ledge for a moment, looking down at the 3-story drop. Don't think, just move. She dropped. The snow cushioned the landing, barely. Pain shot through her ankle as she hit, but nothing broke. Kaelra rolled to her feet and ran toward the chaos. The courtyard was carnage. Bodies in the snow, guards mostly, torn apart with the kind of savage efficiency that said the thing hunting them wasn't just killing, it was destroying. Blood spread in dark patches across white snow. Weapons lay scattered where they'd been dropped. And in the center of it all, the thing that had been Rick's turned to look at her. It was massive, easily 8 feet tall, hunched forward, covered in dark fur that seemed to absorb light. Its eyes glowed pale gray, the same color as Rick's, but empty of anything human. Claws like knives, jaws that could crush bone. It growled, a sound that vibrated in Kaelra's chest and made her instincts scream run. She didn't run. Instead, she took a step forward. Rick's. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I know you're in there. The thing's head tilted, watching her like a predator watching prey. I'm not running, Kaelra continued. Another step. Her ankle screamed protest, but she ignored it. I'm not fighting. I'm just here. It moved, fast, covering the distance between them in 3 bounds. Kaelra stood her ground. It stopped inches from her, so close she could feel the heat radiating off its body, could smell blood and snow and something wild underneath. Its breath misted in the frozen air. She looked up into those glowing eyes and pushed every ounce of calm she had into the space between them. I see you, she said softly. The monster and the man, and I'm not afraid. That was a lie. She was terrified, but she didn't let it show. The thing's growl softened, shifted, became something almost confused. Kaelra raised her hand slowly, so slowly, and pressed it against the creature's chest. Its heart hammered beneath fur and muscle, racing too fast, too hard. She could feel the curse in it, writhing like something alive, trying to consume everything Rick's was. She pushed back. Not with strength, not with power, just with presence. With the same stubborn refusal to break that had kept her alive through years of being nobody. You're still in there. I know you are. The creature shuddered. Its form rippled, shifting, caught between monster and man. Kaelra held firm, kept her hand pressed against its chest, kept projecting that impossible calm into the chaos. Come back, she whispered. You're stronger than this. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature's eyes flickered, gray to gold, gold to gray. It made a sound, half growl, half groan, and collapsed. The transformation was brutal, bones cracking, reforming, fur receding, mass condensing, the creature shrinking back into the shape of a man. Rick's hit the snow on his hands and knees, gasping, his body shaking with tremors. Kaelra dropped beside him. Hey, you with me? He looked up. His eyes were gray again, human but haunted. What did you do? He rasped. Something stupid. She grabbed his arm, trying to help him stand. Can you walk? He stared at her like she was something impossible. You shouldn't be here. I could have killed you. But you didn't. I've killed others. I'm not others. Kaelra pulled harder. Now get up. You're freezing and bleeding, and if we don't move, someone's going to shoot first and ask questions later. Rick's let her haul him to his feet. He swayed, leaning heavily on her shoulder. Blood ran from cuts across his chest and arms, self-inflicted probably, during the transformation. Guards were emerging from the buildings, weapons raised, expressions terrified. Stand down! Rick's voice cracked like a whip despite his condition. All of you, stand down. They hesitated, staring at their king covered in blood and snow, being held upright by the Omega prisoner he'd claimed. Now! Rick snapped. The guards lowered their weapons. Kaelra half-dragged, half-carried Rix toward the fortress entrance. Her ankle throbbed. Her whole body ached. But she didn't stop until they were inside, away from the storm and the staring eyes. The hallway was warm, safe. Rix pulled away from her, leaning against the wall. He was shaking, aftershocks from the transformation, probably. You stabilized me, he said. It wasn't a question. I don't know what I did. Yes, you do. He looked at her, and something in his expression had changed. The ice had cracked, revealing something raw underneath. You have a gift, a rare one, the kind that hasn't been seen in generations. Kaelra's stomach twisted. I don't have... You calmed the curse, Kaelra. No one's ever done that before. The chains barely hold me. The vault fails half the time, but you... He stopped, his jaw tightening. You walked into the storm and brought me back. So what? I'm useful now? Is that it? Anger flared hot in her chest. You kept me here because you knew. You knew I could do this. I didn't know. His voice was quiet, dangerous. I suspected. After that night in the garden, when you didn't submit, didn't run, I felt something, a resonance, like you were the opposite of the curse. The cure, Kaelra said bitterly. Yes. So I'm not a prisoner. I'm a tool. You're both. Rix pushed off the wall, closing the distance between them. And you're the only thing standing between me and becoming a monster permanently. Kaelra's hands clenched into fists. I should have let you tear yourself apart. But you didn't. Because I'm an idiot who ran toward danger instead of away. No. He reached out, his hand catching her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You did it because some part of you knew, the same way I knew when I saw you in that garden. We're connected, Kaelra, bound by something neither of us chose. She jerked away from his touch. I don't want to be bound to you. I know. I want to go home. You can't. Why not? Because the council knows now. His expression hardened. They'll have felt the curse break tonight. They'll know something changed. And when they figure out it was you... He stopped. They'll either try to kill you or weaponize you. Either way, you're safer here. Kaelra laughed. It came out harsh and broken. Safe, right. Locked in a fortress with a cursed king who needs me to keep him human. Yes. That's not safety. That's slavery. Call it whatever you want. Rix's eyes were cold again, that brief crack of vulnerability sealed back over. But you're not leaving. Not now. Not ever. The words hit like a death sentence. Kaelra turned and ran. She didn't know where she was going, just away, anywhere except here, facing this impossible truth. Her ankle screamed with every step, but she didn't stop. Through corridors, upstairs, past shocked servants and guards who didn't try to stop her. She found herself in a tower, one of the high ones, with windows that looked out over the mountains. The storm had started to break, clouds pulling apart to reveal stars and the pale edge of the moon. Kaelra pressed her forehead against the cold glass and let herself break. She'd survived years of being invisible, endured mockery and dismissal, and the casual cruelty of a world that thought she was worthless. She'd learned to be small, to disappear, to survive by not mattering. And now she mattered too much. Now she was the cure to a curse she hadn't asked for, bound to a king she'd insulted, trapped in a fortress built from ice and violence. The door opened behind her. Rick stood in the threshold, his chest still bare and blood-stained, his expression unreadable. I told the guards not to follow you, he said quietly. Why? Because you deserve at least the illusion of choice. He moved into the room, keeping his distance. I know what this is, what I'm asking of you. It's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. No. He was quiet for a moment. But it's survival, for both of us. Kaelra turned to face him. What happens if I refuse? If I find a way to leave anyway? The curse will consume me completely. I'll lose myself during the next full moon, and the council will tear Dominion apart looking for a replacement. His jaw tightened. Thousands will die in the chaos. So I'm responsible for them too now? No, you're responsible for yourself, but consequences don't care about fairness. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to wake up and find this was all a nightmare. But she couldn't. Because deep down, beneath the anger and fear, she knew he was right. She'd felt it when she touched the creature in the courtyard. That connection, that resonance. Like two pieces of something broken, recognizing each other. I hate you, she said. I know. I'll never forgive you for this. I wouldn't expect you to. But I'm not running anymore. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or relief. Why not? Kaelra looked out the window at the mountains beyond, vast, frozen, beautiful in their cruelty. Because you were right, she said quietly. I'm tired of enduring, tired of being invisible, tired of surviving by being small. She met his eyes. If I'm going to be trapped here, I'm doing it on my terms. Not as your prisoner, not as your cure, as your equal. Omegas aren't, I don't care what Omegas are supposed to be. Her voice was steel. Either you treat me like I matter, or I walk into the next storm and let you become a monster. Your choice. Silence stretched between them. Then Rick smiled. It was small, sharp, but genuine. Equal, he repeated. That's ambitious. I'm full of bad ideas tonight. Apparently. He extended his hand. Then let's make it official. Partners. Not king and prisoner. Not alpha and omega. Just two wolves trying not to destroy each other. Kaelra looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it. His grip was firm, cold, but steady. Partners, she agreed. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled through the mountains like applause or warning. Because the council wouldn't accept this. The old packs wouldn't bow to an Omega standing equal to a king. The system they'd survived in for centuries would fight back with everything it had. But Kaelra had made her choice, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible anymore. The council arrived 3 days after the storm. Kaelra was in the training yard when the first messenger came, a beta from Nightfang territory, his coat still dusted with snow from the mountain pass. She watched from the stone steps as he dismounted, his expression grim, and disappeared into the fortress with two of Rix's guards flanking him like an honor guard or a threat. Hard to tell which. They're coming for you. She turned. Rick stood in the doorway behind her, dressed in the formal black and silver of Dominion leadership. He looked every inch the king, cold, controlled, untouchable. But she'd seen him shaking in the snow, seen the monster beneath the surface, and the performance didn't work on her anymore. Let them come, Kaelra said. You don't understand what you're agreeing to. He moved down the steps to stand beside her. The council hasn't convened an emergency session in 15 years. When they do, people die. People were already dying. Your curse made sure of that. And now they know it's broken. His jaw tightened, or at least changed. They'll want to know how. They'll want to control it. They'll want to control me, you mean? Yes. Kaelra looked out at the mountains, white peaks stretching endlessly in every direction. Somewhere beyond them, the five packs were mobilizing. Alphas and their advisors, old wolves with old grudges, all converging on this fortress to decide her fate. How long do we have? She asked. 2 days, maybe 3 if the weather holds them back. Rix was quiet for a moment. I can send you away, hide you somewhere the council won't look. And what happens to you when they get here and I'm gone? I deal with it. By becoming a monster again? His silence was answer enough. Kaelra turned to face him fully. You said partners. That means I don't run when things get hard. This isn't hard, Kaelra. This is political execution disguised as diplomacy. His eyes met hers. If they decide you're too dangerous to live, I can't stop them. Not alone. Not against the full council. Then we make sure they don't decide that. How? She smiled, sharp and reckless. By proving I'm more valuable alive than dead. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Rix pulled every favor he had, calling in allies from territories Kaelra had never heard of. Messages flew back and forth, coded correspondence about alliances and old debts. The fortress filled with guards, doubling and then tripling the patrols. Servants worked around the clock preparing rooms for visiting dignitaries who would probably want her dead. Kaelra spent the time learning. She'd been organizing Rix's records for weeks, but now she read them differently. Not as a prisoner killing time, but as someone looking for weapons. The old treaties were full of loopholes and exceptions. The bloodline documents showed which families owed debts to whom. The historical accounts revealed old grudges that still festered beneath the surface of pack politics. She found ammunition everywhere. "You're starting to think like a politician," Rix observed one evening, watching her cross-reference 3 different documents. "I'm thinking like someone who wants to survive." Kaelra made a note in the margin. "Did you know that Ashenvale still owes Dominion a blood debt from the border wars?" "I'm aware." "And that the current Alpha, my former Alpha, was the one who incurred it by abandoning a joint patrol?" Rix's expression shifted slightly. "Where did you find that?" "Buried in a casualty report from 60 years ago. Your grandfather's notes." She looked up. Garen's father was the commanding Beta. He ran when the humans attacked, left Dominion wolves to die covering the retreat. That debt was supposed to be settled. Supposed to be, but I don't see any record of payment. Kaelra tapped the page. Which means Ashenvale has been operating under false pretenses for 6 decades. If that came out during a council session, Garen would be destroyed politically. Rix moved closer, scanning the document. His entire pack's standing would collapse. And he knows I know. I was organizing these records when the summit happened. He saw what I was working on. Kaelra leaned back in her chair. Which means he has a vested interest in keeping me quiet, permanently. Or keeping you alive if you promise not to talk. Exactly. Rix studied her for a long moment. You've been planning this. I've been surviving. There's a difference. She gestured at the stacks of documents surrounding them. Every Alpha on that council has something to hide. Some old shame, some broken treaty, some lie they've been telling for years. I just need to find enough of them to make killing me too expensive. That's blackmail. That's leverage. Kaelra met his eyes. You play politics your way, I'll play it mine. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. You're learning fast. I had good teachers. Years of being invisible meant watching people, learning how they operate, what they fear. She stood, moving to the window. Alphas think they're untouchable because they have power, but power is just a story people agree to believe, and stories can be changed. Dangerous philosophy for an Omega. Good thing I'm not just an Omega anymore. The words hung in the air between them, a statement of fact, a challenge, a promise. Rix crossed the room to stand beside her. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the snow gold and red. The council will test you, he said quietly. They'll try to break you, make you submit, prove you're still just a low-ranked wolf pretending at equality. Let them try. I'm serious, Kaelra. These are wolves who've spent centuries maintaining a hierarchy that puts them on top. They won't accept. I don't care what they accept. She turned to face him. I'm not asking for permission to exist. I'm taking it. If they have a problem with that, they can bring it up during the session, and I'll explain exactly why that's a bad idea. He almost smiled. You realize you sound insane. Probably, but I'm still here. The council arrived on the 3rd day, descending on the fortress like a murder of crows. Black vehicles wound up the mountain road carrying alphas and their entourages, betas and enforcers, advisors, and witnesses. By midday, the fortress was crowded with wolves who eyed each other with barely concealed hostility. Kaelra watched from a high window as they arrived. She recognized some from the summit. Garen, looking older and meaner than she remembered. A tall woman with silver hair who commanded Nightfang territory. A scarred male from the eastern ranges whose name she'd never learned. Others were strangers, but their body language was universal. Predators sizing up prey. Nervous? Rix asked from behind her, terrified. She didn't bother lying, but that's not new. You can still... No. Kaelra turned away from the window. We're doing this. The council convened at sunset in the Great Hall, a massive chamber at the fortress's heart, all stone and iron and ancient banners from packs that no longer existed. A long table dominated the center, scarred from centuries of use. High windows let in the last of the daylight, painting everything in shades of blood and gold. Kaelra entered, flanked by two of Rix's personal guards. She'd dressed carefully, not in the servant's clothes she'd worn at the summit, but in simple dark pants and a fitted jacket that Rix had provided. Nothing decorative. Nothing that screamed submission or invitation. Just present. The conversation died as she walked in. 11 alphas sat around the table with Rix at the head. Every eye turned to her, assessing, judging. The weight of their combined presence was crushing, dominance rolling off them like heat, making her instincts scream to lower her eyes, bow her head, show her throat. Kaelra kept her chin up and met their stares one by one. "You must be the Omega we've heard so much about." The silver-haired woman spoke first, her voice cultured and cold. "Kaelra Voss, formerly of Ashenvale. Currently of Dominion," Kaelra corrected. "By what authority?" "By mine," Rix said before Kaelra could respond. "Under Treaty Clause 73, which allows territorial leaders to claim individuals who pose strategic value." Strategic value. Garen's voice was rough with contempt. "That's what we're calling stolen pack members now?" "She wasn't stolen. She was transferred with full legal standing." Rix's tone was flat, final. "If you have a complaint, file it with the Administrative Council. Otherwise, her status isn't up for debate. Everything is up for debate when the Council convenes." "Boy," another alpha interjected, the scarred male from the east. "Especially when rumors suggest she's somehow connected to your condition." The word hung in the air like a curse. Rix didn't flinch. "The rumors are accurate. Kaelra has a rare ability to stabilize curse manifestations. During the last full moon, she prevented a complete transformation." Silence fell like a hammer. The silver-haired woman leaned forward. "Impossible. The curse is blood-bound. It can't be broken by—" "I didn't say broken. I said stabilized." Rix's eyes swept the table. "The curse remains. But with Kaelra's presence, I maintain control during transformations. No more deaths. No more losses." "How?" Garen demanded. "That's not your concern." "The hell it isn't. If she has that kind of power, then Dominion is fortunate to have her." Rix's voice dropped to something dangerous. "And the Council should remember that curse stabilization benefits everyone. How many territories have lost alphas to uncontrolled transformations? How many bloodlines ended because the curse consumed them?" Murmurs around the table, uncomfortable shifting. The silver-haired woman, Kaelra caught her name from whispered conversations, Vera, the Nightfang Alpha, studied her with calculating eyes. "What do you want, girl?" Kaelra blinked. "Excuse me." "Don't play coy. Every wolf wants something. What's your price for this? Stabilization?" This was the moment, the pivot point. Kaelra could feel everyone watching, waiting to see if she'd stumble. She didn't. "I want recognition," Kaelra said clearly. "Not as an Omega, not as property, as a member of this council with full voting rights and territorial standing." The room exploded. "Absolutely not. She can't be serious. An Omega on the council would destroy—" Rix's fist hit the table. The sound cracked through the chaos like thunder. "Let her speak." Kaelra didn't wait for permission. For centuries, this council has operated on a hierarchy that values strength above everything else. Alpha, Beta, Omega, ranked by power, ranked by usefulness in war. But wars change. The humans aren't attacking anymore. They've moved past us, and we're still fighting each other using rules designed for a world that doesn't exist. "Those rules kept us alive," Garen snarled. "Those rules are killing us slowly." Kaelra met his eyes. "How many packs have gone extinct in the last 50 years? How many bloodlines ended because we're so focused on maintaining dominance that we forget about survival? Careful, girl. My name is Kaelra. Use it." She stood, planting her hands on the table. "I'm offering you something no one else can provide. Curse stabilization. The ability to save alphas who would otherwise destroy themselves. But I won't do it as a tool. I won't do it as property. Either I'm equal or I'm gone. Vera laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. And if we refuse? If we decide you're too dangerous to leave alive? Then you lose everything. Kaelra pulled a folder from her jacket and dropped it on the table. Including the revelation that Ashenvale has been operating under false treaties standing for 60 years, that Nightfang violated neutrality agreements during the border wars, that the Eastern Ranges have been hiding curse-afflicted wolves in direct violation of reporting requirements. Silence. Absolute and crushing, slowly, deliberately. Kaelra slid 3 documents across the table, one to Garen, one to Vera, one to the scarred Eastern Alpha. I spent 2 weeks organizing these records, she continued quietly, learning your histories, your secrets, your lies, and I found ammunition for every wolf at this table. She straightened. So here's how this works. You recognize me as equal, give me a seat and a voice, and those documents stay buried. Or you try to eliminate me, and everything I know goes public before I'm cold. Garen's face had gone purple. You're bluffing. Try me. This is blackmail. This is politics. Kaelra's smile was sharp. I learned from the best. Rix was watching her with something that might have been pride. Or terror. Hard to tell. Vera picked up her document, scanned it, and went very still. When she looked up, her expression had shifted from disdain to cautious respect. You have proof of all this? Copies are secured in 3 separate locations. If anything happens to me, they get released automatically. Smart. Vera set the document down carefully. Ruthless, but smart. The Eastern Alpha, his name was Darius, Kaelra remembered, was reading his document with growing horror. Where did you find this? Your predecessor's private correspondence, buried in a subarchive that hadn't been opened in 40 years. Kaelra shrugged. Turns out when you make an Omega organize your records, she reads everything. This would destroy my pack's standing. Yes, it would. Kaelra met his eyes, which is why you're going to vote in my favor. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Vera laughed again, but this time it sounded genuine, amused. I'll be damned, she said. The little Omega has teeth. Did you think I wouldn't? Kaelra shot back. Honestly, yes. Vera leaned back in her chair, studying Kaelra with new eyes. Most Omegas are too beaten down by the system to fight it. But you, she shook her head, you're something different. I'm someone who's tired of being told I don't matter. Clearly. Vera looked around the table. I propose we vote. Recognition of Kaelra Voss as a territorial representative with full council standing. In exchange, she provides curse stabilization services to afflicted alphas across all territories. All in favor? Silence. Then, slowly, Vera raised her hand. Darius followed, his expression sour but resigned. Another alpha, a younger male from the Western Territories, raised his hand with a slight nod. One by one, hands went up, some reluctant, some calculating. None of them happy about it. Garen sat with his arms crossed, fury radiating from every line of his body, but when it became clear he was outnumbered, he spat a curse and threw his document on the table. Fine, but this is a mistake. Mark my words. Giving power to an Omega will destroy everything we've built. Then we'll build something better, Kaelra said simply. Rick stood, his presence commanding immediate attention. The vote is recorded. Kaelra Voss is recognized as a territorial representative with full standing. This council is adjourned. The alphas filed out slowly, some shooting hostile glances at Kaelra, others looking thoughtful. Vera paused on her way past. You made enemies today, girl. I made enemies the day I was born in Omega, Kaelra replied. At least now they have to pretend to respect me. Vera's smile was cold and approving. You'll fit right in. When the hall finally emptied, leaving only Kaelra and Rix and the echoing silence, Kaelra's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the nearest chair, her hands shaking with adrenaline crash. That was insane, she managed. That was brilliant. Rix moved to her side. Where did you learn to negotiate like that? I didn't. She looked up at him. I couldn't be small anymore, so I went big. You went nuclear. Same thing. Kaelra laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. Did that actually work? Did I just blackmail my way onto the council? Yes, you did. He crouched down so they were eye level. And now every alpha in 5 territories knows your name, knows you're dangerous, knows you can't be dismissed. Is that good or bad? Both. His expression was serious. You won this round, Kaelra. But Garen was right about one thing. You made enemies, powerful ones who won't forget this. Let them remember. She straightened, forcing her spine to stiffen. I'm not invisible anymore, and I'm not going back. The words felt like a vow. 3 days later, the first request came. A messenger from the Northern Territories, a young beta with nervous eyes and a formal letter sealed in wax. Kaelra opened it in Reek's study, reading the careful script with growing disbelief. They want me to come stabilize their alpha, she said. He's curse-afflicted, transforming every full moon. They're losing control. Rix looked up from his desk. Will you go? That was the deal, wasn't it? I provide services. They recognize my standing. The deal also doesn't obligate you to put yourself in danger. Kaelra folded the letter carefully. If I don't go, they'll say I was bluffing, that I can't actually do what I claimed, and everything we built falls apart. So you're going. So I'm going. She met his eyes. But not alone. Partners, remember? Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. Partners. They left for the Northern Territories the next morning, traveling with a small guard detail through mountain passes still choked with snow. The journey took 3 days, and Kaelra spent the time trying not to think about what she was walking into. She'd stabilized Rix once, during a moment of desperate instinct. But she didn't fully understand how it worked. Didn't know if it would work on another cursed wolf. Didn't know if she was about to fail spectacularly in front of witnesses who would gleefully report back to the council. The Northern Alpha's fortress was smaller than Dominion's stronghold. More functional, less imposing. Built into a cliff face overlooking a frozen lake, it had the look of something designed for defense rather than display. The Alpha himself was a surprise. Kaelra had expected someone like Rix, cold, controlled, radiating dominance. Instead, she found a woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and exhausted eyes, sitting in a sparse chamber that smelled of herbs and desperation. "You're younger than I expected," the Alpha said bluntly. "You're nicer than I expected," Kaelra replied, a faint smile. "I'm Mira, Northern Alpha for 20 years, cursed for 5. She gestured to the scars on her arms, deep gouges, badly healed. "It's getting worse. Last moon I killed 2 of my own guards. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, help." Mira's eyes were steady. "If you can." Kaelra spent the next hour talking with Mira, learning the patterns of her transformations, understanding how the curse manifested. It was different from Rix's, slower, more insidious, eating away at control gradually rather than exploding all at once. When the full moon rose that night, Kaelra stood in the reinforced chamber they'd prepared, watching Mira's body begin to change. The transformation was brutal, bones shifting, fur erupting, the woman screaming as she became something else. Kaelra stepped forward and placed her hand on the creature's chest. "Breathe. I'm here. You're not alone." The same calm she'd projected at Rix, the same stubborn presence. The creature snarled, lunging, and stopped. Its eyes flickered, wild to aware, monster to woman. Mira's voice came out rough, barely human. "I can think. I can—" "Stay with it," Kaelra said quietly. "Don't fight the form. Just stay present in it." For 2 hours, they stood like that. Kaelra's hand on the creature's chest, projecting calm and presence and refusal to run. And slowly, gradually, Mira learned to exist in both shapes at once, monster in body, but human in mind. When the moon set and Mira transformed back, she collapsed weeping. "I was myself," she gasped. "The whole time I was myself." Kaelra helped her stand. "Yeah, you were. How? I don't know. I just connect. Make space for you to stay grounded." She smiled tiredly. "Turns out being an Omega is useful for something." Mira laughed through tears. "You're extraordinary. I'm surviving. There's a difference." But when they returned to Dominion a week later, word had already spread. The Northern Alpha's miracle. The Omega who could tame curses. The low-ranked wolf who'd defied the council and won. Messages came from other territories, requests, demands, desperate pleas. Cursed alphas who'd been hiding their afflictions for years, terrified of being executed or overthrown. All of them asking for the same thing: stabilization, control, hope. Kaelra read them in Rix's study, feeling the weight of expectations settling on her shoulders. "You don't have to do all of them," Rix said quietly. "Yes, I do." She looked up. "Because every wolf I help is another one who owes me, another vote I can count on, another piece of leverage." "You're thinking long-term. I'm thinking survival." Kaelra set the letters down. "The council accepted me because I had dirt on them and because you backed me. But acceptance isn't the same as respect. If I want real power, the kind that lasts, I need them dependent on me, indebted." "You're building a power base. I'm building insurance." She met his eyes. "Because the minute I stop being useful, they'll find a way to eliminate me. So I'm making sure that day never comes." Rick studied her for a long moment. "When we started this, I thought I was using you to control my curse. And now? Now I'm not sure who's using whom." Kaelra smiled. "Good. That means we're actually partners." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet, covering the mountains in fresh white. Somewhere below, in the territories and packs, the old order was beginning to shift. An Omega sat on the council. Cursed alphas were finding hope instead of execution. The hierarchy that had ruled for centuries was cracking. And Kaelra Voss, low-ranked, dismissed, once invisible, stood at the center of it all, learning to wield power like a weapon she'd forged from nothing. The real war was just beginning. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting from a position of weakness. She was fighting to win. The coup came in spring, when the snow had finally melted and the mountain passes opened enough for armies to move. Kaelra was in the northern territories, working with Mira's second-in-command, a young alpha who'd been hiding his curse for 3 years, terrified it would cost him his position. She'd spent 2 weeks teaching him control, watching him transform without losing himself, and was preparing to return to Dominion when the messenger arrived. The beta was bleeding, his clothes torn, gasping for air in the doorway of Mira's fortress. "Dominion's under attack," he managed. "Internal. Garen and 4 other alphas, they're calling it a vote of no confidence. They've got half the council convinced that King Rix is unfit to rule." Kaelra's blood went cold. "When?" 3 days ago. They moved fast, sealed the fortress, cut communications." The messenger swayed, and Mira's guards caught him before he fell. "The king sent me before they locked everything down. Said to tell you," he coughed, blood flecking his lips, "said they're using the curse as proof, claiming you're a witch who's manipulated him, that the stabilization is fake, that you're both threats to pack stability." "That's insane," Mira snapped. "Everyone knows the stabilization works. They don't care about truth, they care about power." Kaelra was already moving, grabbing her coat, her mind racing. "How many are with them?" 5 alphas, maybe 50 enforcers, but they've got sympathizers in the other territories. Wolves who think an Omega on the council is against nature. The messenger grabbed her arm. "Miss Voss, they're planning to execute both of you. Public trial, public execution. Make an example. How long before? 2 days? Maybe less?" Kaelra looked at Mira. "I need to get back, now." "You'll never make it in time. The mountain passes are still dangerous, and if Garen has people watching, I don't care. I'm not letting Rix face this alone." "You'll die trying. Then I die." Kaelra's jaw set. "But I'm not abandoning him." Mira studied her for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "Then you're not going alone. I'm coming with you. So are my best fighters." "Mira, you can't." "The hell I can't. You saved my life, gave me control I thought I'd never have again." Mira's eyes were hard. "And more than that, if they succeed in destroying you, every cursed alpha in 5 territories loses their only chance at survival. This isn't just about you and Rix anymore. It's about all of us." Within an hour, they were moving. 15 wolves, Mira's elite guard plus Kaelra, racing south through mountain trails still slick with snowmelt. They traveled through the night, pushing past exhaustion, driven by the knowledge that every hour they delayed was an hour closer to execution. Kaelra rode in grim silence, her thoughts circling the same brutal truth. She'd gotten cocky. She'd thought blackmail and leverage would be enough to keep her safe, but she'd underestimated how deeply the old wolves hated change, how much they'd risk to preserve a system that gave them power. "You're blaming yourself," Mira said, riding up beside her. "I gave them ammunition, made myself a target." "You made yourself matter. There's a difference." Mira's voice was firm. "The alphas who are doing this? They would have found another excuse, another way to attack, because they're terrified of what you represent. An omega with power, a wolf who proved the hierarchy is bullshit." Mira smiled grimly. "That's worse than any curse, because curses can be controlled or killed. But ideas? Ideas spread." They reached Dominion territory on the second day, approaching from the eastern ridge where the fortress's defensive positions were thinnest. Smoke rose from the courtyard, not the smoke of cooking fires, but the thick black plumes of something burning. Documents, maybe. Or bodies. Kaelra's stomach twisted. "We need to get inside without being seen," she said. "There's a service entrance on the north side, used for supply deliveries. If we can reach it." "They'll have it guarded," one of Mira's enforcers pointed out. "Probably, but it's our best shot." They left the horses hidden in a ravine and approached on foot, moving through the scrub forest that clung to the mountainside. Kaelra led them through paths she'd memorized during her early escape attempts, narrow trails that servants used, game tracks that wound between boulders. The service entrance was guarded by 3 wolves in Ashenvale colors. Kaelra recognized one of them, a beta who'd sneered at her during the summit, back when she was nobody. Mira's fighters took them down silently, efficiently. 2 quick strikes, 1 strangled shout cut off before it could become a warning. Inside, the fortress was chaos. Servants huddled in corners, terrified. Guards stood at intersections, wearing mixed colors, some Dominion, some Ashenvale, some she didn't recognize. The coup had fractured loyalties, turning the fortress into a patchwork of territories within territories. Kaelra moved through the corridors like a ghost, using every trick she'd learned during her weeks as a prisoner. Which halls the patrols avoided, which rooms had multiple exits, where the blind spots were in the security patterns. They found Rick's in the vault. Not the deep vault where he'd been chained during transformations, but a holding cell 3 levels down. Stone walls, iron bars, no windows. He sat on the floor, his wrists bound in silver chains that burned against his skin, his face bruised and bloodied. But his eyes were alert, sharp. And when he saw Kaelra, something like relief flickered across his features. "You came back." "Of course I came back, you idiot." Kaelra grabbed the bars, testing their strength. "Did you really think I'd let them execute you alone? I hoped you'd be smart enough to run." "Since when have I been smart?" She turned to Mira's enforcer. "Can you break these?" "Not quietly." "Then loud it is." The enforcer pulled out a tool, something halfway between a crowbar and a weapon, and wedged it into the lock mechanism. Metal screamed against metal. The noise echoed through the corridor like an alarm. "They'll hear that," Rick said. "Good. I want them to." Kaelra met his eyes through the bars. "Because I'm done hiding, done playing their game. If they want to fight, we're giving them one." The lock shattered. The door swung open. Rick stood slowly, the chains still on his wrists, his movements stiff from days of captivity. Mira's enforcer worked on the restraints while Kaelra kept watch. "How many are with Garen?" she asked. "Last count, 5 alphas, about 60 fighters. But he's got support from wolves in other territories. Ones who think the old ways should stay old." Rix rubbed his wrists as the chains fell away. "They're planning the execution for tonight. Public. In the main courtyard. Want to make sure everyone sees what happens to wolves who defy the natural order." "Then we interrupt." Kaelra's voice was steel. "Make our own statement. Against 60 fighters? Against a lie." She looked at him directly. "You said the curse would consume you without me, that thousands would die in the chaos. But that's not the real threat, is it?" The real threat is wolves like Garen, who'd rather watch the world burn than lose an inch of power. Rix's expression was grim. What are you proposing? We give them a demonstration, proof that the stabilization is real, that I'm not manipulating you or faking results. Kaelra's hands clenched. Tonight's a full moon. You transform. I stabilize you. In front of the entire fortress, show them exactly what we can do together. That's insane. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. You can't know that. Yes, I can. She stepped closer. Because I trust you, and you trust me. And that's more powerful than any curse or coup or scared alpha trying to maintain control. Mira cleared her throat. Hate to interrupt, but we've got company. Footsteps echoed from above, multiple sets moving fast. Shouts of alarm as someone discovered the unconscious guards. Rix looked at Kaelra. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He almost smiled. Then let's make it count. They fought their way up through the fortress, not trying to hide anymore, not trying to sneak, just pushing forward with brutal efficiency. Rix, even weakened from days in chains, was a force of controlled violence. Mira's fighters moved like a unit, protecting Kaelra in the center while clearing a path toward the main courtyard. Wolves in Ashenvale colors tried to stop them, went down hard. Beta enforcers blocked corridors, got swept aside. By the time they reached the courtyard, half the fortress knew something had changed. Servants and guards alike pressed against windows, watching the procession with wide eyes. The courtyard was crowded. Garen stood on a raised platform at the center, flanked by the 4 other alphas who'd joined his coup. All of them older wolves, all of them radiating the kind of entitlement that came from decades of unchallenged power. Behind them, a wooden structure had been erected, an execution platform. Garen's eyes went wide when he saw Rix walking into the courtyard, flanked by Kaelra and Mira's fighters. Seize them, he shouted. Nobody moved. The Dominion guards stood frozen, torn between loyalty to their captured king and fear of the alphas who'd claimed authority. The Ashenvale enforcers looked to Garen for direction, but even they seemed uncertain. Kaelra stepped forward, her voice cutting through the confusion. You wanted a trial? Fine, let's have one, right here, right now, with the entire fortress as witness. Garen's face went purple. You don't have authority to... I have council standing, recognized by vote, which means I have every right to demand due process. She gestured at the platform. Unless you're planning to skip the trial part and go straight to execution, in which case, this isn't about law, it's about murder. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. One of the other alphas, a grizzled male named Torvin, stepped forward. The girl has a point. We agreed to a trial. The trial was scheduled for tonight, Garen snapped. Then let's start it now. Kaelra's eyes swept the courtyard. You claim I'm manipulating King Rix, that the curse stabilization is fake, that I'm a threat to pack stability. So prove it. We don't have to prove... Yes, you do. Rix's voice was quiet but carried weight, because if you execute us without proof, you're not enforcing law, you're staging a coup. And every alpha here knows what happens to coup leaders who fail. Silence fell. Garen's jaw worked, rage and calculation warring across his features. Finally, he gestured sharply. Fine. A trial. But when we prove you're both corrupted, when you try and fail, you mean. Kaelra climbed onto the platform, standing directly across from Garen. Here's how this works. Tonight's a full moon. Rix will transform in front of everyone. If I can stabilize him, keep him controlled, keep him human inside the curse, then you admit the stabilization is real and drop all charges. And if you fail, then you get your execution. She met his eyes. Both of us. No resistance. Garen smiled. It was ugly. Deal. The hours until moonrise crawled by like torture. The fortress held its breath, wolves gathering in the courtyard to witness what would either be a miracle or a massacre. Word spread to the surrounding territories. Messages flew on fast horses, and by sunset, representatives from 3 other packs had arrived, drawn by the promise of spectacle. Kaelra spent the time with Rix in a guarded room, neither of them speaking much. There wasn't much to say. Either this worked, or they died. No middle ground. You know this is insane, Rick said finally. You've mentioned that. I'm mentioning it again. He was pacing, restless, the approach of the full moon making his movements twitchy and sharp. If I lose control, you won't. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can stand with you while you try. Kaelra caught his hand, stopping his pacing. We've done this before. We'll do it again. Not like this. Not with hundreds watching, not with our lives on the line. Then we'll make it count. She squeezed his hand. Partners, remember? He looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing her for the first time. The low-ranked Omega who'd mocked him in a garden. The prisoner who'd refused to break. The wolf who'd blackmailed her way onto the council and then proceeded to save cursed alphas across 5 territories. How did you get here? He asked quietly. I stopped being invisible. She smiled. You helped with that. I imprisoned you. You challenged me. There's a difference. Kaelra released his hand. And now we're going to challenge them. Show them that the old ways aren't the only ways, that strength isn't just about dominance. What is it about? Choice, courage, being willing to stand in the fire and not burn. The moon rose as the sun set, painting the courtyard in silver light. Rick stood in the center of the space, chains pooled at his feet, ceremonial, not functional. Kaelra stood beside him, close enough to touch. Around them, the crowd pressed in, hundreds of wolves, all watching, all waiting. Garen stood on the platform, his expression triumphant. He thought he'd already won, thought the curse would do what he couldn't, destroy Rick's and prove Kaelra was a fraud. The transformation began. Rick's body convulsed, bones shifting, muscles tearing and reforming. His scream cut through the night, raw, agonized. Fur erupted across his skin, his shape twisted, growing, becoming something monstrous. The crowd gasped. Some stepped back. Kaelra stepped forward. She placed her hand on the creature's chest, feeling the wild hammering of its heart, the curse writhing beneath fur and muscle like something alive. Breathe. I'm here. You're not alone. The creature's eyes, glowing gray, empty of recognition, fixed on her. Stay with me. Don't lose yourself in the violence. It growled, claws flexed, every instinct in its body screaming to attack, to kill, to destroy. Kaelra didn't move. I know you're in there, Rix. I know you can hear me. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the creature's eyes flickered. Gray to gold, gold to gray, awareness bleeding through the curse. That's it. Stay present. You're stronger than this. The creature's growl softened. Its massive frame shuddered, caught between the urge to violence and the anchor of her presence. Around them, the courtyard had gone silent. Every wolf watching, transfixed, as an Omega stood before a monster and refused to run. Kaelra pushed deeper, projecting every ounce of calm and presence she had. Not controlling the curse, not fighting it, just making space. Creating room for Rix to exist inside the transformation, conscious and aware instead of lost to mindless rage. The creature's breathing slowed, its claws retracted, and then, impossibly, it sat. Not attacking, not raging, just sitting there, massive and terrible, but controlled. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. Kaelra didn't look away from the creature's eyes. Can you understand me? The creature's head tilted, a low rumble that might have been affirmation. Show them, Kaelra said quietly. Show them you're still you. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the creature raised one massive paw, slowly, deliberately, and placed it over Kaelra's hand where it rested on its chest, not attacking, not threatening, acknowledging. The courtyard exploded, wolves shouting in disbelief, alphas arguing, Garen screaming that it was a trick, a deception, that this proved nothing. But Vera's voice cut through the chaos. It proves everything. The Nightfang Alpha had arrived sometime during the transformation, standing at the edge of the crowd with a contingent of her own fighters. Now she strode forward, her expression hard. I've seen cursed transformations, Vera continued, seen alphas lose themselves completely, become nothing but violence and hunger. She gestured at Rix. But this? This is control. Consciousness. He's still present in that form. It's manipulation, Garen snarled. Then explain how. Vera's eyes were cold. Explain the mechanism by which an Omega with no formal training, no pack power, no traditional authority can manipulate a curse that stumped our best healers for generations. Garen opened his mouth, closed it. No answer came. She can do it because it's not manipulation, Mira said, stepping forward to stand beside Vera. It's stabilization, connection. She creates space for cursed wolves to maintain consciousness during transformation. I've experienced it myself, so have 5 other alphas across these territories. That's impossible. And yet here we are. Vera's voice was sharp. Watching the impossible happen, which means either we accept that our understanding of curses and power is incomplete, or we cling to old beliefs and execute 2 wolves who've proven they're more valuable alive. Torvin, the grizzled alpha who'd supported the trial, stepped forward slowly. I vote we accept the evidence. The stabilization is real. The charges are baseless. One by one, other alphas voiced agreement. Even wolves who'd supported Garen's coup were backing away, recognizing a losing position when they saw it. Garen stood alone on the platform, his face twisted with rage and defeat. This isn't over, he spat. Yes, it is. Rix's voice came from the creature, distorted, rough, but unmistakably his. The words were slurred by inhuman jaws, but clear enough. You lost. The creature, Rix, turned and walked toward the platform. Garen stumbled back, terror replacing his rage. What are you? The creature stopped at the platform's edge, lowered its massive head, and in a gesture that would be talked about for generations, it placed one paw on the wooden planks and pushed. The execution platform collapsed into splinters. The symbolism was impossible to miss. Garen fell hard, landing in the dirt. His supporters scattered, and when he looked up, he found himself surrounded, not by allies, but by alphas, who'd backed the wrong side and knew it. Garen of Ashenvale, Vera said formally, you staged a coup against a sitting council member, violated treaty protocols, and attempted execution without proper authority. The penalty is exile. You can't, we just did. Torvin's voice was flat. You have until dawn to leave Dominion territory. After that, you're fair game for anyone who finds you. Garen's eyes swept the crowd, looking for support. Found none. He ran. His supporters followed, disappearing into the darkness beyond the fortress walls. Within minutes, the Ashenvale contingent had vanished, leaving behind only their scattered weapons and the wreckage of their failed coup. The courtyard slowly emptied as wolves returned to their quarters, talking in hushed, excited voices about what they'd witnessed. History being made, the old order crumbling. Kaelra stayed with Rix through the rest of the transformation, her hand on his chest, anchoring him until the moon began to set and his body reversed the change. Bones cracking back into human shape, fur receding, the monster collapsing into the man. When it was over, Rix lay in the dirt, gasping, his body covered in sweat and blood. Kaelra dropped beside him. You did it. We did it. His voice was hoarse. Together. Mira approached, offering a blanket. That was the most insane thing I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot. Thanks for coming, Kaelra said. Thanks for proving it was worth it. Mira smiled. The Northern Territories stand with you, both of you, whatever comes next. Vera joined them, her expression thoughtful. You've changed everything, you know. An Omega standing equal to a king, cursed alphas finding control instead of execution. The hierarchy we've maintained for centuries just broke. Set. Good, Kaelra said simply. It needed to. Not everyone will agree. I know, but enough will. She looked around the courtyard, at the wolves who'd stayed, who'd witnessed, who'd seen the impossible become real. And the ones who don't? They can adapt or get left behind. Vera laughed. You're going to be trouble. I've been trouble since the day I was born. Kaelra helped Rix stand. Might as well own it. The next morning, the fortress woke to find everything changed. Garen's supporters had fled during the night. The Ashenvale delegation was gone, leaving their territory in chaos with no clear leadership. Messages arrived from across the 5 packs, some congratulatory, some threatening, all of them acknowledging that the balance of power had shifted. Kaelra stood in the same garden where she'd first met Rix, looking at the frozen fountain that had started to thaw with the arrival of spring. Ice melting, water beginning to flow again after months of being trapped. She heard his footsteps before he spoke. "Having second thoughts?" Rix asked, joining her at the fountain's edge. "About which part? Blackmailing the council? Fighting a coup? Stabilizing a curse in front of hundreds of witnesses?" "All of it." Kaelra smiled. "No second thoughts. Just processing." "It's a lot to process." "Yeah." She looked at him. He was dressed formally again, the king of dominion, all cold authority and controlled power. But she'd seen beneath that now, seen the man and the monster, and neither one scared her anymore. "What happens now? Now we rebuild, establish new protocols for cursed alphas, work with the territories that supported us, deal with the ones that didn't." He was quiet for a moment. "And you take your seat on the council, not as a token, not as leverage, but as an equal." An Omega on the council, the Omega on the council, the first, but probably not the last. The thought sent a thrill through her, not of power, though there was that, but of possibility, of doors opening that had been locked for centuries. "You know this is just the beginning," Kaelra said. "Garen wasn't the only one who thinks the old ways should stay old. We'll have enemies, wolves who will spend years trying to undo everything we've built. Let them try." Rix's expression was hard. "We've proven we're stronger together than they are apart." "That's not changing. Partners. Partners." They stood in silence, watching the water flow from the fountain. Around them, the fortress was coming alive, servants moving between buildings, guards changing shifts, the daily rhythms of a pack resuming after chaos. But something had fundamentally changed. An Omega stood equal to a king. A cursed Alpha had found control. And the hierarchy that had ruled for generations had cracked wide open, letting light into spaces that had been dark for too long. "Thank you," Rick said quietly. Kaelra looked at him. "For what?" "For being reckless in a garden, for not running when you should have, for standing in front of a monster and refusing to be afraid." "I was terrified." "But you stood anyway. That's courage." He met her eyes. "That's why you won." "We won." "No." A slight smile crossed his face, genuine this time, not cold or calculated. "You won. I just had the sense to recognize it." Kaelra felt something settle in her chest. Not peace. She wasn't naive enough to think this was over. But certainty. Purpose. The knowledge that she'd found her place in a world that had spent her entire life telling her she didn't have one. "Come on," she said, turning toward the fortress. "We've got work to do." They walked back together, side by side. Not king and prisoner, not Alpha and Omega. Just two wolves who'd survived the impossible and come out stronger. Behind them, the garden bloomed, roses pushing through dead vines, spring arriving after the longest winter, life returning to places that had been frozen. And in the distance, carried on the wind, the sound of wolves howling, not in mourning or rage, but in acknowledgement. A new order rising, a new story beginning. Kaelra smiled. She'd started as nobody, an invisible Omega with a sharp tongue and no survival instinct. Now she stood at the center of power, rewriting rules that had seemed unbreakable, proving that strength wasn't about dominance, but about the courage to choose differently. In a world built on hierarchy and violence, she'd become the thing they feared most, proof that the system could change. And she was just getting started.